My name is Dr. Lucas Grant. I'm an engineer specializing in practical solutions, survival systems, and forgotten technologies that can completely change how you live. And today, I want you to picture something for a moment. You walk to your mailbox, pull out your utility bill, and unfold it. The total at the bottom reads 0. Not a billing error, not a promotional credit, just 0. Every single month, every single year, for the entire life of your home. That is not a hypothetical scenario I invented to get your attention. That is the lived reality of Amish families in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, right now in the 21st century. And what I am about to walk you through is the complete system they use to heat, cool, and power their homes without sending a single dollar to any utility company. No solar panels, no wind turbines, nothing you have ever seen marketed to you in a home improvement catalog. What they use is older than this country, simpler than anything in your local hardware store, and so remarkably effective that several state governments have quietly restructured their building codes to prevent ordinary homeowners from replicating it. Stay with me through the full length of this video because the final technique I am going to share, the one I saved for last, does not appear in a single modern construction manual I have ever found. When I finally traced it back to its source and understood why it disappeared from common knowledge, the picture became very clear. Let us start with the numbers, because the numbers are what make this personal. The average American household spends approximately $2,400 every year on energy. Over 10 years, that is $24,000. Over the span of 50 years in the same home, you are looking at $120,000. The cost of a second house flowing directly out of your bank account and into utility companies that have spent enormous sums lobbying to make certain that arrangement never changes. I want you to hold on to a question while we move through everything I am about to show you. What if the most effective residential energy system ever designed was already perfected 4 centuries ago? And what if the only reason you are not living inside one right now is because somebody else's business model depends on you not knowing it exists? That is not a conspiracy. That is an incentive structure. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Layer 1. The geometry of heat. Before an Amish master builder touches a single piece of timber, before he pours a foundation or frames a wall, he does something that no modern developer does. He stands on the land and watches where the sun travels. This is not a spiritual practice. It is applied physics. Every traditional Amish home in Holmes County, Ohio, is oriented so that its longest wall faces within 10 degrees of true south, every single one. This is called passive solar orientation, and it functions as the structural backbone of the entire energy system. Here is why it matters. In the northern hemisphere, a south-facing wall receives direct sunlight from the moment the sun rises to the moment it sets, but only when the sun is low on the horizon, which happens to be exactly when you need heat the most, during winter. In summer, when the sun arcs high overhead, that same south-facing wall sits largely in shadow. The house absorbs warmth when the climate demands it, and deflects it when the climate does not. No moving parts, no controls. Just geometry. Penn State Extension has studied traditional building orientation for decades. Their research confirms what the Amish have known empirically for generations. A correctly oriented home can reduce its total heating load by 30 to 40% before a single additional element is introduced. 30 to 40% from one decision made before construction even begins. Now consider how most American homes are oriented. They face the street. Whatever direction the road happens to run, the front door follows it. A developer shaves 20 minutes off the planning process. The homeowner spends the next 3 decades paying for that shortcut every single month. Layer 2. The window system orientation establishes the foundation, but the second layer is where the Amish system begins to pull decisively away from anything offered by modern construction. Walk around a traditional Amish farmhouse And pay attention to the windows. The south wall is generously glazed, large, deep-set windows that dominate the facade. Move around to the north wall and you will find almost nothing. Perhaps one small window per room, positioned high near the ceiling. The east and west walls carry moderate glazing, carefully proportioned. This is not a stylistic choice. It is a functioning thermal engine. Those large south-facing windows operate as passive solar collectors. During the day, they pull sunlight directly into the living space, converting it into radiant heat. But look closely at the windowsills themselves. They are not the 3-inch ledges you find in a standard American home. They are 12 to 16 inches deep, wide enough to sit on. That depth is not decorative. Those broad sills create a thermal buffer zone, a transitional space that slows the movement of cold air, bleeding off the glass, and prevents it from canceling out the warmth the window just collected. The old builders understood convective air movement at a practical level that modern construction simply set aside in the push to build faster and cheaper. Layer 3, the breathing house. At this point, most people assume they understand the system. South orientation, south windows, thermal buffer sills. That handles winter. What about summer? What happens in July in central Ohio when temperatures climb into the mid-90s and the humidity makes the air feel like a physical weight? This is where the cross-ventilation architecture comes in. And this is the element that genuinely caught me off guard the first time I encountered it, laid out in full. Amish homes are designed around an internal geometry that produces continuous natural airflow through a principle known as the stack effect. The physics is straightforward. Cool air is denser and sinks. Warm air is lighter and rises. If you engineer low intake openings on the north side of the house, the side that stays shaded and cool, and position high exhaust openings on the south and upper sections, something remarkable happens. Warm interior air rises and escapes through the high openings, and the resulting pressure differential continuously draws cooler north side air in through the low intakes. The house circulates air on its own. No fan, no compressor, no electricity consumed. I spent time with an Amish family in Lancaster County who live in a farmhouse constructed in 1887. That structure has been cooling itself with this exact system for over 100 years. The husband told me that on summer days when outdoor temperatures were pushing 95 degrees, the upstairs bedrooms measured 8 to 12 degrees cooler than the outside air, with no mechanical assistance of any kind. I verified that with a thermometer myself. He was not overstating it. Now here's where I need to pause because this is where the regulatory picture enters the conversation. In multiple states, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and an expanding list of others, modern residential building codes mandate mechanical ventilation, forced air systems. If you submit architectural plans for a new home that designates natural cross-ventilation as its primary cooling strategy, the building department will require you to install mechanical systems regardless. The passive system is not explicitly prohibited. It is simply overridden by obligation. You are legally required to pay for mechanical infrastructure even if you have engineered a home that does not need it. Cornell's Building Science Division has documented this regulatory pattern in detail. The academic framing is measured and neutral. The practical consequence is not. Homeowners are compelled by code to purchase and install systems that generate ongoing monthly costs, even when their homes are designed to function without them. Utility industry lobbying for these specific code requirements dates back to the 1970s. I will leave the interpretation of that timing to you. Layer 4, thermal mass, the heat battery. The next element of the system is the one that reshaped how I think about buildings entirely. Most people understand insulation. A well-insulated wall slows the movement of heat from inside to outside, or outside to inside. That is its function. It is a thermal barrier. But there is a second property that matters enormously, and modern construction has almost entirely abandoned it. It is called thermal mass. Heat is not simply a gas that fills a room. Heat can be stored, physically, materially stored, inside dense, solid substances the way water is stored in a tank: stone, adobe, brick, rammed earth. These materials absorb heat slowly and release it slowly. They function as thermal batteries. An Amish home built with thick stone or adobe walls does not stay warm purely because heat cannot escape through them. It stays warm because the walls themselves have absorbed heat during the day and are radiating it back into the living space through the night. A standard modern wall, 2x4 framing, fiberglass bad insulation, drywall, has effectively zero thermal mass. It is an adequate thermal barrier under certain conditions, but it stores nothing. The moment exterior temperatures fall, the barrier is all you have, and you compensate by running your furnace. An 18-inch stone wall absorbs solar energy all afternoon and pays it back evenly through the night. This principle is 400 years old. The builders of the American Southwest understood it. The early stone construction European settlers who came to this continent understood it. The Amish maintained it. Post-war American construction abandoned it in the 1950s in favor of walls that assemble faster, cost less to frame, and ensure that a furnace runs every night of every winter for the life of the building. Layer 5, the masonry heater. Now we reach the heating system itself. This is the component where, when I first encountered a complete description of how it operates, I had to go back and read it a second time because it seemed too efficient to be accurate. The device is called a masonry heater. In the Germanic linguistic tradition from which most Amish communities descend, a comparable term would be kakelofen. It operates on a principle that is almost precisely the inverse of how a modern wood stove functions. Consider how a standard wood stove works. It burns slowly, at relatively low temperatures, continuously. You feed it throughout the day and night to sustain a constant heat output. Because the combustion is incomplete, it produces creosote, the flammable residue that accumulates in chimneys and causes fires. The heat it generates tends to spike near the stove and diminish rapidly with distance. The masonry heater does something fundamentally different. You build a single, intense fire. It burns at maximum combustion for 1 to 2 hours, 2 or 3 substantial pieces of firewood. Then it goes out. That fire, while it burned, drove temperatures inside the firebox well above 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough that combustion becomes nearly complete and creosote formation is minimal. But more importantly, that intense heat has been absorbed by the surrounding structure of the heater itself, a mass of stone, brick, and clay that can weigh between 3,000 and 5,000 pounds. That mass now holds an enormous quantity of stored thermal energy. Over the following 18 to 24 hours, it releases that energy slowly and evenly into the surrounding room. The exterior surface of the stove stays warm to the touch. Pleasant, not dangerous. Children can lean against it. Animals rest beside it. Auburn University's forestry and wood science programs have measured masonry heater efficiency in controlled studies. The thermal efficiency rating comes in at 80 to 90%. The best modern certified wood stoves achieve 60 to 70% under optimal conditions. The difference is not marginal. An Amish family in a properly oriented, thermally massive home in Ohio burns between 3 and 4 cords of wood across an entire winter. Wood they have cut from their own land. The monetary cost to them for an entire season of heating, $0. The average American heating bill runs approximately $1,400 per year, every year, for the entire life of the home. This raises a question I keep returning to. Why does any of this feel like obscure knowledge? It should not. None of these techniques are patented. None require specialized engineering degrees or exotic materials unavailable to ordinary people. A family with solid carpentry skills, access to stone or adobe, and a south-facing piece of land could implement this entire system. The reason this knowledge feels marginal, the reason it does not appear in home improvement guides or mainstream building resources, is not an oversight. The moment these techniques become widely understood and adopted, a measurable portion of residential energy demand disappears permanently. Utility companies understand that. The residential construction industry understands it. The regulatory bodies that receive funding from both of those sectors understand it. That is not speculation. That is how incentive structures operate. The forgotten technique, the floor breath. Now I want to share the element I referenced at the beginning of this video. The one that does not appear in any modern home building resource I have been able to locate. I found it in a 1903 USDA agricultural survey of Amish and Mennonite settlements in eastern Ohio. It had to do not with walls or windows, but with the floor, a component that virtually all modern passive solar literature treats as secondary. In the older settlements of Holmes County, the earthen or stone floors of the main living areas were constructed over a network of clay channels, pipes, roughly 4 to 6 inches in diameter, buried 6 to 8 inches below the surface. These channels connected to an intake opening positioned at the base of the south-facing exterior wall, low to the ground. During winter days, cold outside air entered through that inlet. It traveled through the underground channels beneath the floor. As it moved through the earth, which, at a depth of 6 to 8 inches, maintains a relatively stable temperature of approximately 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, the air absorbed geothermal warmth from the ground itself. By the time it emerged into the living space, it had already been pre-warmed through passive geothermal exchange. No pump, no electrical components, no moving parts of any description. The 1903 USDA survey referred to this as a ground tempering channel. Roman builders of the 1st century employed a structurally similar concept under a different name. The Amish families of Holmes County called it simply the floor breath. The thermal gain was measured at 8 to 12 degrees added to incoming winter air before it ever entered the living space. In the context of a home already benefiting from passive solar orientation, deep thermal mass walls, and a masonry heater, that pre-warming of incoming air pushed interior temperatures into the range of 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit through the heart of an Ohio winter. 2 logs per day, no bill, no grid dependency, no rate increases, no supply disruptions. I have spent considerable time sitting with that outcome, 60 to 65 degrees through an Ohio winter, sustained by firewood cut from the property, and a building system designed 4 centuries ago. A system that requires no monthly payment to any external entity and no connection to any infrastructure that can be disrupted, priced, or regulated beyond the homeowner's control. The Amish did not build this way as an aesthetic statement or a philosophical position alone. They built this way because it works, reliably, durably, and at a cost that keeps wealth inside the household rather than transferring it outward every month for the life of the building. Somewhere in the decades following the Second World War, the broader culture made a different decision. It accepted the premise that paying $2,400 a year for basic thermal comfort was simply the cost of participating in modern life. That premise was never true. And standing in front of a 137-year-old farmhouse in Lancaster County that maintains a comfortable interior climate without a furnace, a thermostat, or a utility account, the evidence of that is impossible to dismiss. If you have ever stood in your home on a February evening holding an energy bill that felt less like an invoice and more like a penalty for wanting to stay warm, now you understand that there was always a different path. It was not discovered recently. It was not hidden by accident. It is still available. I want to hear from you directly. Of everything covered in this video, the orientation geometry, the window architecture, the cross ventilation system, the thermal mass principles, the masonry heater, or the ground tempering channel? Which element changed the way you think about how a home should work? Leave that in the comments. Those responses genuinely shape what I prioritize next. If you believe that substantive, practical knowledge has been systematically pushed to the margins because it threatens someone else's revenue model, then you already understand why this channel exists. Subscribe, because what we examine next goes further than what you just watched. And what you just watched was only the beginning. This is Dr. Lucas Grant for Prime Shelter Lab. Build smarter, depend less. Keep what you earn.